Welcome back to Previously Prohibited. I'm Jenin Eunice, here with my co-host Melissa Whitty, and it's just us today. I know it's been a little while, but we like to do that sometimes. And
Yes.
We're going to talk about some of the stuff going on in the news. First of all, Mike Waltz, who has been removed from his position as National Security Advisor, and he has some pretty scandalous things going on with his campaign funding that Mel took a deep dive into and wrote a thread about, so we're going to talk about that. And then also what is going on in Yemen and the antisemitism hearings at which the congressman from Florida, Randy Fine, the not-so-fine gentleman from Florida, made an appearance. And I haven't watched it because I thought I would lose my lunch if I did, but Mel has, so we'll talk about that. But first, over to you, Mel.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming back. If you could, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let us know what you think in the comments. We always read them. We certainly appreciate all of your comments and all of your feedback. And yeah, we had a congressional hearing on anti-Semitism on college campuses. And I know that everyone has been very concerned about that because we haven't had one of those in like 3 weeks. And so it's been very concerning.
I'm really worried about those.
Yeah. I know.
Those college kids' feelings. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, Harvard released a 300-page, I believe it was, report about all the anti-Semitism on their campus. Someone actually did the duty of did word searches, and the word feel, I feel, they made me feel bad, was mentioned 53 times, and the word felt, like I felt bad after they said this, was mentioned 67 times, which seemed a bit excessive to me, but...
The free press, the amazing free press that's so brave and really goes against the grain, had a reporter who read the whole report, and she picked out the worst incidents of anti-Semitism in it. I wrote about that a little bit. Students were ghosted by friends because of their views on Israel. That's some real anti-Semitism there. I was like, I had people who won't talk to me because of my views on Israel, but it never occurred to me to weaponize civil rights law to try to get them in trouble. But okay. A student was told Zionists aren't welcome here. Okay. Zionism is a political philosophy, so you might not like that, but that's like saying communists aren't welcome here. That's not the same thing as saying
the commies aren't welcome in my house. I'll tell you that right now.
What was another favorite? Oh, a professor said that the discourse on Israel-Palestine is saturated with the pro-Israel side and the pro-Palestine side isn't adequately heard. Well, that's true. It also is not anti-Semitic. What was one of my other things? At a privilege training, which is a stupid thing in my opinion that shouldn't happen. But nevertheless, okay, an instructor said that Palestinians are more oppressed than Jewish people. You might disagree with that opinion. I would say, given that people in Gaza, 2 million of the Palestinians are starving to death right now, that's probably true. I know it might be hard for people at Harvard University to hear that. I know it might hurt their feelings, but that's not anti-Semitism.
I'm not a big fan of the whole oppressive, dialogue. Although I will say that, we've been dealing with this for quite some time, and I don't actually remember any congressional hearings when it was just nothing but, white Christians being accused of being the oppressors of everyone everywhere. So,
I hate this discourse too. I think it's stupid and counterproductive, and it's silly because, these idea that groups are what matters, not people, like it feeds into this idea, I think it frankly furthers racism. I mean, what is it? I sort of touched on that. What does it mean for Palestinians to be more oppressed than Jews? I mean, I would say on average, probably the average Palestinian is more oppressed than the average Jewish person, like in terms of their ability to live.
Right, you can certainly pull, you got the Hadids, you've got,
exactly.
You've got plenty of Palestinians that you could pull out, and you could definitely hold up as obviously these are not oppressed people in any shape or form.
So it's a totally silly thing, but that doesn't make it anti-Semitic. And I mean, this all echoes the discourse. I mean, it's funny because it's the right who's really feeding into this narrative that this stuff is anti-Semitism. Right. These colleges are plagued with anti-Semitism, so we need to have hearings about it constantly and withdraw the funds from the universities. Mm-hmm. This is very like lefty discourse, you know, the idea that, you know, people's feelings, if someone's feelings are hurt, then that's bigotry.
Right. I know, you know, I've obviously, having been on the right, I've been dealing with this for years. I'm a Gemini, so I don't have feelings. Certainly don't ever get into my feelings ever, and I'm pretty tough-skinned. So some of this stuff, I'm maybe not the best person to judge on this because just nothing ever really offends me that much, and I don't get caught up in this stuff. But yeah, reading through, somebody wrote a really long thread last week, and they pulled out what they thought were the best examples of all of this anti-Semitism, and I always think you lead with your strongest example.
Yeah.
And the strongest example of this person had to offer was that someone had been invited to speak, I guess, prior to October 7th, they had been invited to speak at a student organization to tell what motivated them to, pursue whatever degree they were pursuing. And then, of course, October 7th happens. It gets pushed back. The symposium or whatnot gets pushed back, and then turns out this person's grandfather had left Germany, and moved to British Mandate Palestine, and then had kind of worked to circumvent the British mandates on Jewish immigration into Palestine at the time. So this is pre 1948, and had helped to bring tens of thousands of Jews from Europe into Palestine, which again, we know where that led. Okay, yeah. So I get it. Like it's just a tragic story because obviously these people were fleeing oppression in Europe. I'm not unsympathetic to their plight by any means, but at the same time, we do know the outcome. So. And then in the wake of October 7th, when everything is happening, I just feel like that's probably wasn't the right time to tell this story because we know where it led all these years later, you know. And so I personally thought when I was reading that, when they said, actually, we don't think that you should tell your grandfather's story, I could see how that would be hurtful to your feelings, but at the same time, I think you kind of have to read the room to a certain extent. Yeah. I don't know. I thought that student organization kind of did that person a solid by saying, no, actually, we don't want you to tell this story, because I could see where it was going to go, right?
Right.
I could see how you think, you know, this is part of your family lore, and I certainly understand that, but, you know, my family having been in the U.S. since the late 1600s, I assure you will get confronted with things that, because of what happens.
Right.
Obviously, with settlement and conquering and whatnot, it's not always pretty. And I don't know. I think just kind of avoiding that discussion, especially when emotions were so high, was probably the right call on Harvard's part. To be quite honest with you.
No, that makes sense to me. I mean, the way it was, I don't think I read the actual report on that line, although now I can't remember because I've read some excerpts. If it happened as the student said, it probably wasn't like the most delicately put thing. I think I probably would have said, hey, maybe not, like you might want to rethink this, these are the things that could happen if you did this, but we'll leave it up to you. But regardless, it's not anti-Semitism, and it's certainly not warranting like a national case. Like it's completely, this is so blown out of proportion. This is exactly, that's what I'm saying. Like, okay, Zionists aren't welcome here. I mean, maybe not the most tasteful thing. It sort of depends on how you define Zionist and like what you're like, you know, I think it's not the end of the world for someone to say that, but like, okay, but that like, even if you think that's rude or offensive, you don't have to make a national civil rights case out of it and like shut down speech on college campuses and throw people in ICE detention for anti-Semitism, for, you know, this sort of nebulous accusation that all these people are the same thing and everything every one of them does, the others can be blamed for. I can
assure you, as a Republican, Republicans have not been welcome in a lot of places for a really long time. So it's really, it's a little hard for me to shed a tear over this when, again, I have been, you know, identifying as a conservative identifying as a Republican. I've certainly
Right.
been shunned. People don't want anything to do with you. And it is what it is. Like, whatever, get over it. Move on.
It's,
You know?
I mean, you can argue that it's demonstrative of the fact that maybe these college kids need to learn a little bit more tolerance, and we should be having discussions instead of shutting down views. But the irony is they're using that to then shut down discussion of someone else. Like, they're saying, well, this is anti-Semitic to say this, so therefore it violates civil rights law, so you can't talk about pro-Palestine stuff. So it's all wrong-headed, and it's like a, two wrongs don't make a right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My mom taught me that when I
agree.
was like still in a crib. So
I know, it's nuts. And again, I don't know, I have really thick skin, and I'm kind of like, I feel like welcome to the world of Republicans for 20 plus years or whatnot. We just people have been really mean, and you kind of have to make your own way, and if you can hold your breath. But I think a lot of the problem that you're actually seeing is that a lot of these Jewish students are actually lefties in every other way, and so this is a very new territory for them, right? Like, they've never been excluded from the discourse. And so I guess I understand that, but for me, just coming from the right and having been subjected to all of this stuff before, I'm like, suck it up, kid, get over it. You know?
yeah, no, I mean, that's part of what college is supposed to teach you.
Right.
So the idea that the adults in the room or the adults in Congress are like feeding into this rather than saying, I mean, I don't even know if they should be shutting it down. Like, I don't really think Congress should be part of it. I don't think this is Congress's issue. Like,
No, it's not.
I don't really think we need the federal government involved in this.
Right,
but
assuming
maybe I'm
it's,
crazy.
assuming they're not being denied the right to an education, right? And they aren't being shut out of their classrooms. I mean, there are certain instances, obviously, where the federal government should not be funding universities if they are, in fact, violating civil rights laws. But none of this rises to that standard. So it's much ado about nothing, to be quite honest with you.
No,
it's
I
really
mean,
kind of incredible that a year and a half later, we have a 300-page report. They did over 50 interviews with 500 students. And this is the stuff that they're coming up with. And it's almost all my feelings were hurt. I got ghosted. They said I couldn't say this thing. They said I couldn't, but no real, like, I don't know what I was expecting, but I certainly was expecting
more. Yeah, I mean, anyone who looked into this from the start, that was obvious. So I mean, because I went to an Ivy League school, which is not to brag. I went to the worst one, and it's only because my dad worked there. But like, I know what these campuses are like. These are not KKK members. They're like dumb uber lefty college kids who are like, too far to the left, like so far to the left that they're like falling off a cliff. But they're not like. And a lot of them are Jewish. I was in Students for Justice in Palestine when I was in college, and like at least half the students were Jewish. So I was just like, I know this isn't true. And like a lot of professors are Jewish. I knew they were conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And then when I looked at the specific reports, it was very, very clear they were conflating the terms. And if you do that, well, then yes, if somebody says, Palestinians have a right to live in the land too, that's considered anti-Semitic, because it conflicts with some people's definition of Zionism, which is Jews being entitled to the entire land from the river to the sea. So it's all, it's all just based on basically sort of subverting the real, subverting the meaning of anti-Semitism and using it to describe a political viewpoint that people can rationally disagree with.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually I went to a couple of universities, but I graduated from an HBCU, Fayetteville State, and which was actually super conservative. It would be so funny when I would be in my classes because I'm like this self-described Republican. All of the students around me are Black. Some of them are Africans. Actually, a lot of immigrants, and they're all super socially conservative. For the most part, I'm actually more liberal than all of them, and so this discourse like never really would come up. I remember being really surprised when I went there. This was like the last year and a half of my schooling, and before that I had gone to UT San Antonio, which was pretty moderate, but it wasn't really hard left or right by any means, but very conservative discourse, especially in those upper level classes. And so when I hear this talk about, you went to Syracuse, right?
No, I went to Cornell. Yeah.
Cornell, right. Yeah. And so just, this, I don't know. I don't want to stereotype, but I always think of these like uber white. But they're like so left, Yeah. Whereas me, I'm at my HBCU and everyone is so socially conservative. It's ridiculous. I'm like kind of the lefty at that point, I mean, very, very socially conservative. I can say that, very anti-abortion, very anti like gay marriage, things like that, and things that I'm much more liberal on those views.
Yeah.
It's interesting. None of these topics ever came up.
Yeah.
Like ever.
Yeah. So I remember like a year ago, there was a young woman who was supposed to give a commencement speech at one of the California universities. I think it might have been USC. I don't remember. But she was, she was the valedictorian, and they withdrew her invitation because of her like anti-Semitic rhetoric. And that Eli Klein, an art dealer who was, very anti-COVID lockdown, and is extremely crazy Zionist, was tweeting, and had claimed to be very pro-free speech during the COVID era and railed against the censorship, was tweeting about how, this was the right decision and she was an anti-Semite and blah, blah, blah. So I was curious. I looked at what she had actually said and then what they had cited, and she had said she supported one state, and Eli said, well, that means that she wants to kill all the Jews, because otherwise, what's the one state going to mean? I said, no, like a lot of people, and I think most people, the vast majority of people, mean one state for Jews and Palestinians to live with equal rights in peace. And he said, no, she didn't mean that. It means genocidal. And then I read further. I looked at like the next page, which the college hadn't even cited, I don't think. And she had specifically said that. She said, one state where everyone has equal rights. That's what I support. And so I showed him that. And he said, well, that's just stupid. That's just a fairy tale. Like they're going to, hold hands and sing Kumbaya? And I was like, so now college students can't be stupid? Like it's anti-Semitic to just be like a little bit naive? Also, I don't think it's total, I think both sides would have to give a little bit on some things, but, well, really Israel. I don't know why I ever say both sides. Israel would have to give things up in order to attain peace. But like whatever, that's not the point. I mean, you're changing the goalposts, you're conflating the meaning of terms, and a lot of the other Team Reality COVID dissident crew, jumped on the bandwagon. We're doing the same thing, and I was like, see, this is how they operate. And by they, I mean the pro-Israel people. It's
the Zionist online discourse. This is how it goes. I came across this space at one point where this guy said you cannot engage in conversation with these people. You have to talk over them. Yeah. And it was such good advice, and I didn't take it for the longest time. I would try to beat them in their own arguments, but you can't, right? That is not honest conversation, because again, I have to assume that if you're going to form an opinion on this woman, you would have had to actually read what she said, right? Yeah. When I am so terrified of being called out and being like made a fool, right? So I'm always reading the whole thing to make sure when I form an opinion that I'm going to put online that I know that I can back it up, right? Yeah. And so I actually do kind of hold anybody that's got a platform of over 10,000 people, which I know Eli Klein does. I actually do hold you to that exact same standard. Yeah. And so you better have read what she wrote. So I assume, number one, going in, that if you have an opinion on her, you read what she actually said. And now, having assumed that, you have now chosen to misrepresent her to your public. So you are lying to them. Yes. Yeah. Okay? And so now, at this point, there's no engaging with you anymore. Yeah. Simply debunk, speak over, and be done with. Yeah. That's it. And, it took me a long time to get to this point, but that's why, people say all the time, like, why do you engage with these people? They're lying. And I'm like, no, it's good to use them as a springboard to show the truth to people who maybe don't know. But at the same time, I'm always speaking over them. I am never speaking to them. Yeah. Because they're not actually worth it, to be quite honest with you.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, lest anyone be concerned that he learned a lesson, he just did this repeatedly with multiple people for the last year, to the point I think he ended up blocking me because I kept calling him out. So the latest one before he blocked me was Mahmoud Khalil. And within, I don't know, 20 minutes of the reports that he was detained for his pro-Palestine activity, Eli Klein was, get rid of him, get him out of the country. He's a terrorist. He's an Islamist terrorist. He wants America, destroyed. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, they've specifically cited only his pro-Palestine activism. The videos that are coming out are showing him talking about peace. And, like, you're just saying things. And willing to, like, destroy people's lives.
Yeah, I know. And what was really sad was actually seeing, it was Matt Taibbi. I will be honest, I'm like a total Matt Taibbi fangirl. I'm not gonna lie. I have all of his books. I adored him prior to this, and then just to see him kind of, it's been so disheartening to actually to not see him. That's what it is. He's just been so silent. And then somebody retweeted, I think it was like Zaid. Is it Zaid?
Yeah, Zaid Jelani.
Yeah, who I like. I certainly don't agree with him on a lot of stuff, but I do like him. Retweeted this thing from Taibbi's Substack, and he was actually defending Marco Rubio's stance, saying why, and Taibbi specifically, I'll read it to you guys real quick. Taibbi said, the Otzerk story, for instance, really would be an ominous development if it were for sure true that she was detained for writing one op-ed, which is the contention of her attorneys. But Marco Rubio has specifically denied this, saying there's more to the story, and though he easily may not be telling the truth, it's infuriating to see that key detail ignored in coverage of the top papers.
Because he hasn't produced it. He would have produced it if they had anything. And actually, the Second Circuit just came out with a ruling in her case today, really scathing against the government. Yeah, so this was sort of a jurisdictional fight. The government has been arguing that the federal courts don't have jurisdiction to review these habeas petitions. It should be an immigration court, or at least till there's a final order in immigration court. And Mahmoud Khalil's judge rejected that argument last week. So did Ozturks, and then the government appealed to the Second Circuit. The Second Circuit said that the federal court has jurisdiction. Which is very good news, because the immigration courts they're terrible. They tend to rubber stamp the government. They're not independent. They're part of the executive branch. So they usually just do whatever the government says. So that would be a problem. So, but they also said, and the government has not, despite claiming they have evidence of other wrongdoing, to this date, the government has only produced evidence she wrote this op-ed. And that seems to be all they have. So, I mean, it would be highly unusual, unless it was like extremely classified information, which I really doubt. Like, it's highly unusual that the government wouldn't have produced any evidence, if only to assuage the public. Like, because people are freaking out about throwing someone in ICE detention for writing an op-ed, as they should freak out about. So normally the government would be like, wait, we have more, and here's what it is. Not just like, oh, we have more evidence, when the evidence so far has been of anti-Semitic activity that jeopardizes our foreign policy, is writing op-eds. Like, that's completely crazy. So Taibbi, I think, has like the flip side of Trump derangement syndrome. I think he's like so mad at Democrats that now he thinks that like any cause that Democrats or the left has is wrong, which is...
I know. My favorite book of his that he wrote is this book called The Divide. He wrote it in 2014, and it was such a brilliant concept, because what he did was, there was a case that it never got as much... It didn't get as much attention as it should have, and it was the HBC drug laundering case. Do you remember it?
Vaguely.
Bank got caught laundering all this cartel money. So Taibbi went down to the New York court where the case was being settled on the same day. And he actually went into like the small claims courts, or not small claims, but like petty theft and things like that. And to see like these bank executives who were getting this sweetheart deal with the government where they had been laundering all this cartel cash for years. Stuff that would have put you and I in prison for life, perhaps even sent us to the electric chair. These guys were getting off with a fine, right? And then on the exact same day that they made this deal, Tybee went and he actually got a hold of some of the people who were pleading out in normal criminal cases, and the punishments that they were handed, right? So this was, to me, it was such a brilliant concept, right? To really look at the way that the rich and the poor are treated in the criminal justice system in America.
Yeah.
So to see someone who I know has an intimate understanding of the way that the criminal justice system works, now 10 years later, because this is 10 years after the fact, for him to say, well, why isn't the New York Times citing Marco Rubio's, trust me bro, she's really bad, it's so frustrating, right?
It's also,
what happened to
I
you?
know and
I'm not one of those people. I'm not a lefty,
I mean, neither of us are. I think they also have cited it. I think most of the reports I've read have said Secretary Rubio claims he has other evidence but has not produced anything to date. The one thing about Taibbi is, he had a very personal experience with sort of persecution by the Democrats that if people remember a couple of years ago, he testified in Congress about the censorship and then received a visit from the IRS. They were awful. They were awful in the hearing. The IRS showed up at his house while he was testifying, which, clearly they don't show up at people's houses. So it seemed to be pretty targeted. And then that Stacey Plaskett, the representative from the Virgin Islands, sent him a letter basically alluding to the possibility of criminal prosecution for misstatements. He had mixed up I forgot what it was, the CISA and the CIS, which are one's an agency and one's an NGO, but they work together, cybersecurity and infrastructure. So he had mixed up the names a little bit, and she's had accused him basically of lying and threatened him with, sort of impliedly threatened him with criminal prosecution. So he's angry at the Democrats, and I can understand that. And a lot of the people from the COVID era were treated awfully, but you can't excuse, the side that's doing the bad thing now, the side that's in power.
Like,
I'm sorry, but the Republicans are in power right now, and they're doing some pretty bad stuff.
To me, even if you don't want to, right? Like, I don't actually get too... maybe I should. I know people probably want me to necessarily to get really in the weeds with some of these violations of Trump on, like, the immigration stuff, the El Salvador stuff. You know, even I'm so, like, inappropriate at times. I even make jokes about El Salvador jails. I know that's not appropriate, guys. I promise you. I know it. It's just a joke. But, and I know it's not supposed to be a joke. It's not funny. I agree. Anyways, so I get it, but for me, like, Israel-Palestine is such, like, a moral issue. It's just, it's not Republican, Democrat. It's not left or right. It is right and wrong. It is good and evil. It rises above all of that stuff. So it's so frustrating for me to see someone when you've got this girl who hasn't done anything wrong. She's just simply written an op-ed and in the most benign. If she's done anything wrong, it's maybe she could have even done more, to be quite honest with you.
Maybe she should have protested.
Right, like at this point, fuck it, why not? You know, I mean, it looks like they're coming for you anyways. And so, you know, for me, it's really frustrating, and I get it. And so I think today, reading that from him, I don't know, I was like a little heartbroken. I know they always say, like, don't meet your heroes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, like, describe him as my hero, but I would say that he's someone that I certainly just he really opened my mind to rising above a lot of the partisan stuff. And I really identified with so many other things, and I just think he's so brilliant in such a way that it was very frustrating. But again, he's human, and you're right, he probably has fallen victim to the flip side of Trump derangement, which is just...
the Democrat derangement. I mean, I see like two issues. One is not speaking up about Palestine, Israel, when I think and I think anybody who doesn't say anything is probably gets it, but is scared, because the punishment is, especially if you're at all affiliated with the right, or, you know, working with right-wing people or conservative people.
Come on, guys, we're super friendly over here.
No, I know. But they're the only negatives are going to be from being pro-Palestine. I know personally. But so there's that, the cowardice of that, like this is the moral issue of our time. And then there's the other one where you're like branding yourself as a free speech warrior, a fearless free speech warrior without, partisanship. And then you're failing to speak up when the side that now you've cozied up to and now you're comfortable with is doing it. So, those are kind of two separate issues, but I think it's a failure on both counts. And I've said it before, I think, on this show, but extremely disappointed in all of the people who failed to speak up on these things because, they were brave free speech warriors. They cared about human rights during COVID, but they don't want to piss off their newfound friends. And like, I'm sorry, but you're a failure then. Because you're not really a freedom fighter. You did it once or twice, and now you don't want to be uncomfortable again.
Agreed. And again, and I say this over and over and over again, I know that there are people who are watching and you are nervous, and I assure you, you have to speak up. You do. Okay. You will regret it for the rest of your life if you don't stand for what is right now, because the things that are happening in Gaza will mark the history books. They are so awful, and our humanity is being destroyed there, to be quite honest with you. Western humanity is, and it has to end. It has to end.
I mean, so I'm somewhat sympathetic
and it's not too late.
To that's true. It's not too late. I agree with you to an extent. I'm somewhat sympathetic to people who, are middle income or lower income and are supporting their families, absolutely. And they are pretty sure they would lose their jobs or something and not, be kind of locked out of their fields. I am less forgiving of people like Matt Taibbi, who I'm sure can never make another dollar and still live plenty comfortable for the rest of his life and provide for his family. That's just like it. And there are so many people who do it. Like Glenn Greenwald has done it. Lee Fang, Leighton Woodhouse. Like they've all taken the risks. And they've taken hits. I know they have. Certainly Lee and Leighton. So sorry, but like and the bigger your platform, the greater your obligation too. That's the other thing, because the more influence you can actually have.
I know. I was actually on Facebook, and I never go on Facebook at all. I was on there yesterday looking for something, and I have a girlfriend who married a man who is Middle Eastern. I don't actually know. I've never met him because she moved away and then she married him. And I saw her post. I went up to her page and I saw her posts. And this is a girl. She's like me. She's like blonde hair, like super conservative. And like we used to work together. We used to have so much fun together. She's such a sweet girl. And I saw her posts, and all of her other posts, get lots of interaction. She's a realtor, a real estate agent, not a realtor. And so she gets a lot of engagement and whatnot, but she was making posts about Gaza, and like, there was just no interaction. Thankfully, I looked to make sure that there was no negative comments, because I was going to go in like, but she didn't, but I don't know, just seeing these posts and seeing like the kind of desperation, I think, from her, and then her and her husband, they actually own a Mediterranean restaurant. They actually have a really great story. Maybe we should have her on. I just thought about that. Yeah, y'all would love her. She's wonderful. And anyways, so they have a really crazy COVID story, and then and whatnot. And just to see her, these sweet posts from her, and when I say sweet, I mean like just kind of highlighting the humanity in Palestinians and and their causes, and like showing like, here you can donate here and you can donate here, and then just getting no interaction from them. But thankfully no negative interaction either. I don't know, for me it kind of fueled me even more. I was like, no, we have to make this bigger than what it is, right? We have to keep going. And her posts started back in December, right?
Yeah.
December 2023. So
I mean, they're starving everybody to death now. And the Free Press had just that newspaper, that rag is the most disgusting filth, propaganda filth. Like, I hope it goes down in infamy as like basically the written Goebbels of this era. But they ran a piece about how the so-called starvation in Gaza is made up, and it's the result of shoddy journalism. Like, what are you talking about? They are saying they're doing it. Smotrich and Ben Gvir are saying it. Netanyahu's saying it. Like, have you seen the photos?
They-
Like all the
they-
international human rights. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
They quite literally record themselves dumping all the flour outside the gates. Like, I don't know what you need. People,
I know.
You know?
Like, there's been nothing that has entered in 8 weeks, I think, at this point. And so apparently I actually just couldn't bring myself to read the piece because I knew I was just going to lose my mind. Also, I don't have a subscription. But I saw someone had posted a passage where apparently the main thing they relied on was this report for, I forgot what the organization was, but saying that they didn't have the numbers. But if you read what they actually said, they said they couldn't get the numbers because the conditions were so bad that like they can't get any statistics because the situation is so dire and desperate. Like that, that's not saying that there's no starvation, you morons, but they're not morons. They know exactly what they're doing.
Have you ever listened to that song by Shaggy? I said Shong, but it
Which
wasn't
one?
me. I was actually
Yeah.
listening to that right before, and I was thinking about that. I was like, this is like such a blatant gaslighting. This is like the theme song
I
of
know.
gaslighting, of gaslighters everywhere. It wasn't me. You know?
I know. I mean,
She caught
I
me
am
on the
like-
counter. Wasn't me. Like,
when
what the
people
hell?
say like propagandists should get like criminally charged, I'm always very wary as a free speech person. But like some of this, I would say, might arguably be like incitement to genocide or like I don't. I'm
telling you, Barry Weiss wakes up every morning and plays the Shaggy song. All right, it wasn't us. Like that has got to be what keeps her going because it's just so blatant, the lying and the deceit. And that it's in your face. They haven't let any supplies, any food in.
I know.
For over 6 weeks now. At what point, like, how long did you think? And and of course, this is after the caloric restrictions. This is after the, they had shut the ships, the shipping containers in. I believe prior to October 7th, I want to say there was like 158, something like that is the number. And then after the average, that was 158 shipping containers per day. And now the average is like, prior to this latest shutdown was like 50 something, right? So it's always, for over a year, it's been a very, very small amount of food that's been getting in. And then now for 6 weeks, it's just been a total siege, right? And of course, this is by design. There are none of these, airdrops coming down, right?
Yeah.
We saw those. You remember we saw the King of Jordan doing his whole little spiel. You saw Biden with his peer, his humanitarian peer. That was just a total just money laundering scam and whatnot. All of it just a boondoggle, right? None of that has happened. The people are starving. And the people, anyone denying that is either totally, wholly ignorant or, a demon at this point. You are a demon.
You'd think they could have like blamed Egypt or something. Just like, try something else.
Yeah.
It's Egypt's fault for not letting the food in. Anyway, should we talk about Mike Waltz?
Yes, we should.
So Mike Waltz was fired because it turned out he was working with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu behind Trump's back. And Trump didn't like that. Of course, sadly, he's still got another cushy position. So, but
Yeah.
but he doesn't have his role as national security advisor anymore. So who would have guessed that such an upstanding gentleman was funneling money to his, I guess his assistants or something. I don't know exactly what the title is.
Right, yeah,
But,
yeah.
But
so
tell us about
research.
it.
I did some digging on Mike Waltz's campaigns, finances. So just so people who don't know, if you leave office, what happens is they always have money left over, right? Especially if they're big fundraisers, the way Mike Waltz was and is. Most politicians have 3 campaign funds, right? They have their principal campaign fund, they'll have their joint fundraising campaign, and then they'll have a leadership fund as well, right? And so I'm not going to explain all of that, but across all of those, Mike Waltz had about $5 million that he raised in for the 2024 cycle, and when it was all said and done, he had $1.5 million left over. And so usually when you've got that money left over, they'll roll it into some kind of like hybrid fund, or they'll send it all to like the NRCC, or that's the National Republican Congressional Committee, or something like that, right? Actually, I take that back. They never actually send it all to the NRCC. Usually they spend it all themselves. But it's always put into like a leadership fund, something like that. So I go to look at Mike Waltz's stuff the other day after he gets fired, and I was just interested to see who had been donating to him. And what I saw was that his principal campaign fund was still open for 2026, which was, in my opinion, or in my experience, it's rare. The only other time I've ever seen that was actually Kevin McCarthy, whose campaign fund is still open and still has like millions and millions of dollars in it, but we won't go there. Anyways, so Mike Waltz in the first quarter, so if your principal campaign fund, actually if you have any campaign fund, you have to file quarterly filings. So at the end of March, they have to file, they had to file the first quarter. And what I found in his first quarter filings was that he had been funneling all of this cash in quote unquote consultancy fees to these men who had been working for his congressional office, right? The one was his chief of staff, one was his communications director. He had given them these kind of exorbitant fees for consultancy fees, and right before he left office. Now, I don't even know how that's legal. I'm not accusing him of breaking the law, but I do not understand how it was that he was able to spend almost $300,000 on in quote unquote campaign expenditures when he in fact was not running for office, right? He wasn't running for the 2026 campaign. But the real kicker is that there were three of them, right? One of them didn't work directly for him. He was working with the Trump transition team, but one of them got an $85,000 payment, and then a $60,000 payment, and then a $30,000 payment. All of them shut their consultancy businesses down after receiving these big paydays from Mike Waltz, and then they turn around and they started working for him at the National Security Council, which to me is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Because I worry about what were those payments for? Were they some sort of loyalty payment, right? Was he buying their loyalty? Because now that Mike Waltz is gone, someone else is going to be in their place, and we know that Mike Waltz was undermining Trump, especially in peace, especially on Iran. And now he may be gone, but his people are still there. Right. And that's a problem to me. Right.
And you say that they're actually not breaking the law, even though this sounds super shady. They've probably figured out a way to
I assume that they have, right? Yeah. The treasurer that they have chosen, I am telling you, anytime I'm looking at some really, really, really shady campaign finance filings, this dude's name is on them. And there have been many complaints filed against this man, who I will not name, but if you go to the FEC and you pull up Mike Waltz, you can find his name. But somehow, some way, he always comes out on top. So my guess is that he knows how to do it. In fact, this guy is so shady that immediately, if I pull up a candidate's campaign finances and I see his name on it, boom, I'm downloading, because I know there's going to be some shady stuff on here, right?
Yeah.
So much stuff. We could have a whole episode on me talking just about the crazy stuff that I've seen come out of this so-called quote unquote compliance consulting firm. But so I'm not accusing them of breaking the law per se, but at the same time, it's so these people write the laws, right?
Right.
They write the laws to suit them. Okay?
Right.
So I actually hold them to a different standard. Yeah. I don't give a damn if you broke the freaking law or not, that you wrote yourself.
It's not ethical. Yeah. It's not ethical.
Unethical what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay?
And it's crazy how I worked in Congress for a little bit, and I mean, the things they subject, like, I don't want to say I was low level, but I wasn't a congressperson. I was a staffer. Like, the things they subject you to, like, you can't get paid $200 for writing an op-ed. You can't get paid a $500 honorarium for giving a talk, just extremely strict ethical standards. And then these people, the ones who are powerful, the ones we know are actually rich, even though they shouldn't be,
senior staffers,
are taking in all this money through these backdoor channels, and it's legal because of the way they've done this. It's actually really infuriating. So the people making like, $60,000 a year, that's not what I mean, but that is like what a lot of staffers are making, are unable to like take any extra money, but these guys are, milking it all in through the.
Oh yeah, these guys are already making over $200,000 a year, and then plus they're allowed to take this quote unquote outside payment. So now we're up to in at that point it's like 15% of their income. So it's a little over $31,000 that they're allowed to have, which I know in DC is a little different than it is, in say Fayetteville, North Carolina. $230,000 is a lot more money here. Obviously, I get that to a certain extent, but at the same time, there is just a level of, you actually do have to sacrifice a little bit if you want to work for your country. I'm sorry, but $230,000, you got to commute a little bit, but you actually can still live pretty decently out of DC in Virginia,
Oh, yeah.
And so, but of course it's never enough for these people, right? Because the power isn't enough. And so now what happened with Mike Waltz's guys is that they opened up these private consultancy firms, right? And of course, you have to dig underneath them, and you have to find their registration in their LLCs, but you can find it. It's actually not that hard. It just takes a little bit of digging. And then in the case of these now National Security Council employees, they were taking $60,000 and $85,000 bonuses, quote unquote, for their consultancy services, which of course we know is BS because Mike Waltz wasn't running a campaign in 2026, so he of course didn't need any consulting services. And so of course he paid these people these astronomical, $85,000, that's more than most Americans make in a whole year.
Yeah.
And this is what this guy got in a single check.
Yeah.
For, again, he didn't do anything for it.
Right.
To our knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, it creates all sorts of problems that these people have these ways to get this money, because it also means, they're in it for kind of the benefits, not necessarily the public service. You have other problems if they don't get paid well, which is like only rich, what happens then a lot is like only rich people go into it, whatever. But
correct.
There are all sorts of issues. But anyway.
Oh yeah, there's a third guy that actually came from Waltz's campaign that I didn't talk about, but he actually is like this Nepo baby, right? His name is Andrew Peak. His father is named Jeff Peak. He was actually part of the the meltdown in 2008. I'm pretty sure he tanked a bank. His dad did anyways. I look up this dude's finances, or not his finances, but I look up his house and whatnot, and he's living in this like $3 million house in the suburbs up in Bethesda and whatnot. So I don't want those guys like running our government either. It's like this fine balance, where I'm kind of like, hey, I get it. Like, I'm okay with you making $200-something thousand a year, but again, I'm actually not okay with you taking $60,000 bonuses from your boss. And then, now it turns out that your boss is actually loyal to a foreign country. Now I have to wonder if you're loyal to a foreign country because you know where your bonus came from.
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's, a major issue is.
Yeah.
Israel being able to buy these people, but that might be a topic for another day.
Yeah, it's very concerning, and I talked about it. If you follow me on X, you can go. I pinned it to my profile. It is my pinned tweet right now, and you can see that it's concerning that these men are still working at the National Security Council, especially with Mike Waltz gone. Trump.
Well, and he's just in the UN now, right? Like.
Well, he's about to go to confirmation. So that the UN ambassador still has to be confirmed by Congress. Maybe some congressman will see this post, this thread, and ask him about these. I won't bank on it, though, because it turns out that all of our members of Congress are super, super shady with their campaign finance, and I actually don't expect any of them to ask him about this whatsoever.
Yeah, it's a shocking problem, and probably one that won't get resolved anytime soon, since, the people, as you pointed out, the people who make the laws are benefiting from this. So.
Correct.
And I think, it's a really good point that even though technically they're maybe not breaking any laws, I think this sheds light on why the laws are a problem. And I don't know how you do this. Like, do you have a separate legislative body that makes laws for Congress so that they can't, because it's like it is kind of a conflict of interest.
Right. Well, it's you have to hold your politicians to a standard outside of the law, to be quite honest with you. And in that, I can look at this and maybe you aren't breaking the law, but you actually are acting unethically, and I'm not going to vote for you. I don't give a damn what party you belong
I think
to.
that's generally the solution that I fall down on, and it's
like
the political solution. It's the same with I've thought about people who are constantly bragging about how they're doing Israel's bidding and how much they love Israel. That's treason. I mean, I guess it's not technically treason since you have to be working for an adversary of the U.S. And obviously the U.S. considers Israel an ally, even though it's not in reality.
It's traitorous.
But it certainly, it reeks of that. And I think in sort of common parlance, it's treacherous, treasonous. But I don't know how you would effectuate that through the legal process. So it does seem to me like people just have to start voting for people who are putting America first, not a foreign country. We need candidates too, like Jose Vega.
Exactly. We need people, I was listening, I cannot remember the podcast I was listening to a couple weeks ago, and it really just struck home with me. The gentleman who was talking, he talked about, he said, you have to choose principle over party at the end of the day. And that really struck home with me, and I said, you know what, I'm actually going to vote my principles from now on. And if my principles aren't on the ballot, I'm not voting for you, period. That doesn't mean I'm going to vote against you. I'm not necessarily going to vote against my party, but I don't actually owe you my vote whatsoever.
No, I don't. I couldn't care less about the party anymore. I mean, I hate both parties as parties. There are certain, there are a few people within them that I like. I like Thomas Massey quite a bit. That might be the only one.
I know. I've been a party person for a really long time. And this last time, I just, after that, and I think because I live in a swing state and there's so much pressure on you all the time, and this, I don't know, going forward, I'm just, I will not. And I used to not understand this. I've had a lot of friends who have been libertarians or whatnot, or third party voters for a really long time. And I didn't understand it until it was maybe 2 or 3 months ago that it just clicked for me. I was out walking with my dogs and I stopped and I was like, this dude is right. I don't know, why is this not? I've always been a lesser of two evils voter,
Yeah.
And no, I'm actually not going to vote lesser of two evils. I'm only going to vote my principles from now on. If you don't represent them, you're not getting my vote, period.
Yeah. Well, I'm falling asleep, so not because you're boring, but because it's late. And I had a very long day, so.
All right. Well,
all right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah,
Check
we
out
will
my
be back.
tweet. Yes,
Yes,
we will be
do.
back soon.
And we'll put it in the subject line.